There is one game we all play, and that game is called real life. Not everyone is good at it, but some of us are. Real life is an open world game with endless possibilities. And after all, only the uncultured spend their day-to-day life in just one country. So join me in my life of leisure as I explore the best games for the handheld around the world. So, I finally arrived here in New York City in the United States of America. They call this place the Big Apple, but I look around here and it doesn't look like many people eat their fruit and veg. The Big Apple, more like the big heart attack. It looks like they've got diabetes on every corner. So now finally your new hero has arrived. It's time to make America a colony again. Sorry for my Freudian slip. I mean, it's time to make America great again. Out of my tiny little fan base, 50% of you live within this country. Speaking of my tiny little fan base, since I have been making my handhelds around the world videos, there has been one subject that has been requested more than any other, and that is my thoughts on the Sega Game Gear. So, let's take an in-depth look at the system and discuss whether it's worth playing today. Let me start by taking you all the way back to 1990. It's only 6 years after the paranormal terrorist attacks rocked this very city. 1984 saw Manhattan ravaged by the Marshmallow Man, and 1989 the city was attacked by the Great Vigo, the Scourge of Carpathia and the Sorrow of Moldavia. As an Englishman born in the 1980s, that's now what I generally associate with New York, and how I heard about the place in the first place, watching bloody Ghostbusters. But anyway, let me take you back to 1990 again. We of course saw the release of the Sega Game Gear, a handheld system designed to compete with the one-year-old, very successful Nintendo Game Boy. In an attempt to take Nintendo's handheld market share, Sega set out to create a system in the form of everything the Game Boy wasn't. Sega marketing director prior to the release stated, "There is clearly a need for a quality portable system that provides features that other systems have failed to deliver. This means easy to view full colour graphics and exciting quality games that appeal to all ages." Another decision made by Sega was to use the same technology from the Master System in the device in order to cut down the developmental time and get the handheld into stores as quickly as possible. Part of the intention of this move was to make Master System games easy to port to the Game Gear. One big improvement though was that the Master System only offered a colour palette of 64 colours in the games, whereas the Game Gear offered a whopping 4,096 colours. Now you're really playing with power. In order to improve upon the design of their competition, Sega designed a Game Gear with a similar shape to a Mega Drive controller, with the idea being that the curved surfaces and longer length would make the Game Gear more comfortable to hold than the Game Boy. Early launch titles included a port of the Atari ST game Columns, a game focusing on matching coloured jewels and making them disappear, to compete directly with the Game Boy's flagship game, Tetris. And of course, they also released Sonic the Hedgehog to go one-on-one with Super Mario in part of the great 2D side-scrolling mascot war. Right, so let me now tell you about my early experiences with the Sega Game Gear. In my family, my mother treated myself and my brother in a communistic manner. We were treated completely equally and were both bought equal shares of toys and games. She was so obsessed with this idealistic view of equality that she even dressed us in matching bloody clothes every day. One year we went on a family holiday and she bought us a Sega Game Gear and a Nintendo Game Boy, both to share and play on the aeroplane. Basically, both systems were to share, but of course we both got to carry one each in each of our own rucksacks. I remember strongly politicking and opting to carry the Sega Game Gear myself. After all, our home consoles were Nintendos, so I finally had my own Sonic game to play, and on top of all of that, I was a bloody child. And what child in his right mind is going to opt for the monochromatic screen over that bright backlit Sega screen? It seemed like a no-brainer at the time, but wow, how wrong could I have been? Obviously, I bloody love the Game Gear. The moment I picked it up, I was playing it in the taxi on the way to the airport, I was playing it within the departure lounge, and I was playing it on the plane. But then, something terrible happened. So, I'm having fun playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and then the system just dies. The bloody batteries run out before I could even reach my destination. This was the start of a long ongoing problem. Do you know how hard it is for a child to make their parents buy them batteries all the time? I can tell you, bloody hard. And a portable system that you cannot play for long when you're out and about, in my opinion, makes the whole thing pretty pointless. Of course, once at a hotel room, I could always plug the system in the wall and give it a go from there, but that made me feel like my system was on a bloody life support machine. I found whenever we were on trips, myself and my brother would end up taking it in turns on the Game Boy instead. In fact, we both played the Game Boy so much that in the end our mother just bought us another one, and we would take out 2 Game Boys on trips and leave the battery guzzling Game Gear at home. So, that was all the experience I had really with the Game Gear in the 90s. Simple convenience quickly led to the system's demise. If you at home were dual owners of the Game Boy and Game Gear, then I would love to hear your experiences with the 2 systems. Which one did you prefer at the time? But to be fair, all of that is in the past, and today's video is about playing the Game Gear today. So being an adult who has the cash to buy as many bloody batteries as he damn well pleases, let's take a modern look at this thing. Something great about the Game Gear is that it has a large library of games to enjoy. As a child, since the batteries died so fast, I never really remember needing much more than about 4 or 5 games. There are in fact actually over 300 games to enjoy on this system, and when it comes to retro games, this is one of the cheapest systems about. I have well over 100 games for this bloody thing, all of which have probably all cost me no more than £1 each. The collector's market just isn't there really for this one. I think a big reason for this is finding fully functioning Sega Game Gears today is bloody difficult. I own 3 of the things and only one of them worked properly. However, just prior to making this video, the bloody sound on the device stopped working, and now I will have to source another elusive working one down the line. Old Game Boys seem to nearly always still work, but the Game Gears do not seem they were built to last so well. Obviously, the most impressive aspect of this thing is the screen. It is in full colour, however playing with it now, the screen looks extremely dated. You will find that you cannot look at the screen head on and that you have to play it at a very specific angle in order to see the picture at all. On top of all of this, it looks very blurry compared to modern coloured handhelds. As I previously mentioned, I do in fact believe the Game Gear has a lovely library of games, and most of which are available at an extremely cheap price. It's just a shame it's no good to play them on the bloody thing. Old Game Boy games are much more useful, as you can play them in the coloured backlit Game Boy SP, play them on the Game Boy Player on the GameCube, play them in the Super Game Boy on the SNES, and even insert them into the modern Retron devices. These Sega cartridges, on the other hand, currently have no other use than to stick them in the temperamental old Game Gear. I may annoy some people by saying this, but I'm unfortunately going to have to give the Game Gear a massive thumbs down. Unfortunately these days they're very temperamental and faulty, they take 6 batteries and guzzle them in a matter of minutes, and the bright screen is nowhere near as pretty as it used to be. The whole scenario with the Game Gear versus Game Boy kind of reminds me of pro wrestling. In one corner you have the simplistic Game Boy, then in the other corner you have the massive Sega Game Gear that took so many steroids, aka batteries, that it died at an extremely young age. Basically it's as if Sega didn't look at the core elements that made the Game Boy a success in the first place. So Sega Game Gear, I hate you for teasing me throughout my childhood with your quality library of games combined with your horrible, embarrassing battery life. It just wasn't fair at all. I had to opt for the plain Jane Game Boy every single time for the sake of convenience. I wanted to love you, Sega Game Gear, but I really just couldn't. So I am completely renouncing you, you complete piece of rubbish. Whilst the system's shortcomings may have limited our enjoyment of these games, there is in fact a nice ending to this video. As I have mentioned previously, the game library to this system is decent, and now there is finally a way to enjoy these classics on the go. This is the Jxt Gaming Tablet, in which I briefly talked about in my Game Boy review video. You can download an app on this thing that lets you play Sega Game Gear games. The battery life on this thing is great. The battery is rechargeable and the screen on this thing is better than any handheld I have played to date. So, with the power of this thing, I can play all the fantastic games the Game Gear has to offer without having to worry about the system's limitations. So you can now join me as I travel across North America experiencing some of the best games on the system. So to summarise, the Game Gear system itself is now extremely dated. However, with the great library of games, in this very rare occasion, I would advise you to emulate. Cheerio!
I'm the dickhead cowboy, you gotta
What is this?
I'm the dickhead cowboy.